Good evening and welcome to this panel discussion and book launch on artificial intelligence and the future of power. This is a session presented by Infinity Foundation India and Rashtram School of Public Leadership. I would like to just introduce myself, the moderator for your session today. My name is Prashant Singh and I'm the Director, Center for Innovation and Governance at Rashtram School of Public Leadership, which is hosted in Rishihor University, Sonipat. I serve on the board of an economic advisory services company and a think tank, which will be publicly announced in due course of time. Earlier, I worked in the areas of technology, commercialization of technology, entrepreneurship and innovation, and I led initiatives in ecosystem design development for internet products and services, e-governance, financial and fintech services. I was a founding member of Microsoft in India, and I did my electrical engineering from IIT Kharagpur and my PGDM from IIM Bangalore. Most humans are fundamentally unaware of the nature of changes that are taking place. Leadership across the political, economic, and social domains are fundamentally unprepared. And in this context, actually, I would like to welcome Rajiv Malhotra, who's written a seminal book and a series of path-breaking books that he has written in the past. And today's theme of artificial intelligence and the future of power is essentially a part of the continuum of his earlier books. Rajiv Malhotra was trained initially as a physicist, computer scientist specializing in AI in the 70s. And after a successful corporate career in the United States, he became an entrepreneur and founded and ran several IT companies in 20 countries. Since the early 90s, as the founder of his nonprofit Infinity Foundation Princeton, Rajiv has been researching civilizations and their engagement with technology from a historical, social sciences, and a mind sciences perspective. He's authored several best-selling books. I'd like to welcome Rajiv. And before we kind of get in, here is a snapshot of the book. And I've gone through this book. It is written in very simple and uncomplicated language. and it's very thought-provoking. So welcome, Rajiv, and
Thank you.
good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Rajiv, two questions as we kind of start the proceedings for this panel. The first question is, what motivated you to write this book? And for the benefit of our readers, we'd also like to understand what is the essence of this book?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a good question. The biggest technological disruptor in history, even more than the Industrial Revolution, which changed the course of history, is this artificial intelligence that we are in the midst of. It's not something futurist. It's already started, and lots of things are happening because of AI, which the book explains. So its impact is in every domain where the mind is important, because it amplifies the mind, it disrupts the mind, it augments the mind, it enhances the mind. And so its impact is felt everywhere that you can imagine. But the impact is unequal. Not everybody is affected the same way. And so delicate equilibriums and balances get disrupted, because when you have multiple forces held in balance, somebody is impacted in a positive way, somebody is impacted more positively than the other one, somebody is impacted negatively. So since the impact is unequal on individuals, on regions of a country, on industries, across nations, and so on, there is going to be a disruption. So this is why I wrote the book, because 5 years ago, my interest in and involvement in AI is very old, but I put it aside. 5 years ago, I started realizing that the intellectual elite are not fully aware of the ramifications of AI to the extent they should be. I found that economists were obsolete. In fact, I wanted this book to be launched by Niti Aayog, but they said this is kind of, they were not interested. I know some people in the planning commission, in the Niti Aayog. I know some government advisors in economics. I know people in the popular space on social media who are well-known economists. And I did talk to them privately, and I must say I was disappointed. Now, of course, they'll all come and say, oh, yeah, we were thinking about it too. But at that time, they weren't. And I found that the industrialists and technologists have a view of the AI's social impact, which is largely informed by Western corporate people, multinationals, Pricewaterhouse, Ernst & Young, McKinsey, World Economic Forum. And that view is very top-down. It's a view of the maybe 10% of India's employees or less are working for the Sensex economy, the large corporate sector. The 90% are self-employed, work in small, medium size, and they were not consulted in these reports. It was not these are not bottom-up reports talking to village panchayats or districts and so on. These reports have been written on AI that everybody is accepting as the gospel truth in India, and it disturbed me. I also found that social scientists ought to really be thinking about AI as sort of disrupting social sciences, not just disrupting society, but disrupting the whole science of society, disrupting the models of social science, disrupting how data is gathered. The old-fashioned way of gathering data is obsolete, because now you have real-time machine, big data being gathered real-time. And so I talked to many social scientists in Delhi University and various places, trying to get them on board. And I'm talking about things I've done privately, off the record, for 5 years now almost. And I found they were not interested. And I found that spiritualists who ought to, I have a whole chapter 5 on the spiritual dimension, the nature of the self, and what the thing about algorithm. Are we algorithm or are we being? Are we biological machine or are we spirit? So these kind of complex issues have not been adequately addressed by spiritualists. I also realized that some computer scientists, most computer scientists have a muddled idea on intelligence versus consciousness. A very prominent computer scientist, dear friend of mine, he's a great guy, but I want to remain friends. But his view in the public has been that computer intelligence cannot replace humans because they're not conscious. Well, I got news for you. Being conscious is irrelevant to intelligence. Being conscious is irrelevant to intelligence. There is unconscious intelligence. So if I'm a driver of a car and my job is replaced by a driverless car, it doesn't matter that this driverless car is unconscious. It doesn't matter that I'm a conscious driver and it's an unconscious machine. The point is, if it can do the job and replace my job, my life is disrupted. If scans of X-rays and MRIs can be computer analyzed much faster, much more accurately, it doesn't matter that the machine is unconscious. If facial recognition is better with machines than with human beings, and in a stadium with 50,000 people, they can pick one. They can say, okay, that is Prashant, we have his picture, or that is Rajiv. And the machine can pick it up faster, quicker, in different lighting conditions, in all sorts of circumstances. It doesn't matter that the machine is unconscious. So this business of confusing conscious and intelligence is a very common problem that even computer scientists have. And I have a whole section in this book called Consciousness versus Intelligence to highlight this difference. And then I found that I was disappointed that the public is moronized. Public, I call it the moronization of the masses, meaning that as machines are getting smarter, people are getting dumber. They are dependent more and more on Google Devata, Twitter Devata, Facebook Devata. A lot of young people tell me, what's the importance of learning and getting all this knowledge? I'll ask Google. Google will tell me what I need to know. Siri will tell me, sir. I'll look up Wikipedia. I'll just speak to my machine and it'll tell me. So this business of outsourcing the adhikar to these digital adhikaris, which are not even Indian, which are not even from a Vedic civilization. So forget the fact that these are mechanized and these algorithms and big data and machine and neural networks are controlled by certain people according to their ideas, according to their principles. And these are not Vedic principles. Forget that, but the other part is that on top of it, these are not even Indian. They are. It's like the East India Company controlling strings from somewhere else, deciding who will fight whom, deciding how to make you happy, how to make you sad. So this control over the mind's psychology of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people from far away, through intermediated by algorithms, as if this algorithm is some kind of a devata. This is really ruining India. I feel that the military leaders are the group that understand it. This is my conclusion over the last 5 years. If you ask me later on, specifically what are some examples of bad policies from 5 years ago till today, recent also, I'll be happy to give you a few such examples. So I tried my best to navigate this area privately. I went hopping from this ministry to that government department. I was always well received, great respect. They gave a lot of hospitality, but they didn't do a darn thing about it. And so I decided that I should go public. In 2019 was the World Hindu Economic Forum in Chicago. I proposed that my book is ready. This book was ready. I just was cleaning up the writing, but the thesis was ready 2 years ago. And we could have saved the loss of these 2 years had we allowed this thesis to come out. I wasn't given the spot. I was put in a small room somewhere and asked to talk on some, education policy or something like that. People didn't quite get it. The people organizing that didn't quite get it. But I did present this to them, that I have a thesis which will be very futuristic. It will be as important for the next decade as my books Breaking India and Being Different were important in the past decade. And you will see when the books this book comes out, people will start suddenly talking about it. And I wanted that forum to be an occasion to launch it, but it was not considered that important. Even now, when I get invited, quite often, people ask me to write about, to give a talk on, Hindu phobia or something, on some conversion going on or some, decolonizing education. I tell them that all those are superseded by artificial intelligence. And this artificial intelligence is going to tell you about Breaking India 2.0. The Breaking India forces, and I can give you more details on it, just like when I wrote the book Breaking India a decade ago, I infiltrated various organizations, foreign nexuses to get in, and took many years to understand what their thinking was and how they were operating in India. The Indian Breaking India forces connected with the global forces. Same thing I've done in this case. I've gone into some international nexuses, the use of AI, the use of big data, the use of machine learning, the use of psychological warfare on Indians, the use of figuring out which Indian can be manipulated in what way, who will fight whom, who we can bring on our side. This kind of a profiling has been going on now for the last few years in a very detailed way. What happened when there was an uprising against Article 370 and CAA, some people blamed, George Soros and things like that, but they didn't go far enough to see that what is the role of AI in the manner in which they've studied us and in the manner in which they're manipulating us. And ironically, the social media luminaries, who are very proud of being the new leaders of social media, they have all these video channels and they're doing all these manthans and so on. They themselves are giving up the big data to the foreign digital giants, and not conscious that they are actually helping train the machines about themselves and their own vulnerabilities. So this is a very complex field, and I thought I have to write this book because I could not succeed in getting the thought leaders convinced. A lot of people actually advised when the book was about to go to press, a year ago, and the COVID delayed it. Some people said, "Don't write this book because it'll give ideas to our enemies." And I said, our enemies, you shouldn't underestimate. They know all this. Our enemies have been studying all this. I have to shake up our own leaders. So the purpose of this book is to wake up our leaders so that they'll take note of these trends. Some of them are already thinking like this, but they need to be empowered. So they need to become bolder. And so I decided to write this book for all these reasons, to bring to the surface. I'm taking the risk, I'm sticking my neck out, but I think I'm more than happy to be corrected. As a lover of India, as somebody who's deeply concerned about Bharat, I want people like the leaders in this panel, because they are the kind of people I want to bring this book to. I want them to help raise awareness in all segments. Our gurus need to wake up. Our social media luminaries need to wake up. Our government planning people need to wake up. Yes, the planning people have woken up recently in the past 12 months, 6 months mainly, or 12 months on AI, but it's too little, too late. And with that, I will stop. These are some of the things that concern me, that trouble me, for which I wrote this book. And as the conversation proceeds, I'll be happy to give more details. And thank you to everybody for being on this panel. And I look forward to a wide cross-section of views from all of you.
Thank you. I would like we do a very quick and short introduction to the panel members present. I would like to welcome Gautam, Dr. Gautam Sen, formerly with the London School of Economics and former economic advisor to the Prime Minister of India, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and also to the Prime Minister of Nepal. He has written on the impact of economy and technology factors.
Greetings to you all, namaste. Let me first congratulate Rajiv for his chronic habit of poking us all in the eye periodically. He did that with Breaking India, did that with the Battle for Sanskrit, and now yet again he's given us a poke in the eye. And I think it is well deserved and merited. But of course, that might somewhat explain his unpopularity in some quarters. But I congratulate him for putting this forward, if only because there was a need for public debate, urgent public debate. And whether anybody likes it or not, this is now going to take place. Let me repeat now a commonplace which I have been hearing for some time, that AI is equivalent to the onset of steam in the Industrial Revolution and the Stockton-Darlington Railway in 1828, the first one, electricity or computers in the 1940s, thanks to the war effort in the United States and the United Kingdom. I would in fact compare AI a little bit more to space research in terms of its sheer technical achievements, though I suspect its impact will be greater than all of them put together. The reason for that is our conventional view of science has been successfully challenged by a lot of people actually now for a good length of time, that it is not linear. It does not proceed in successive tranches. It can be geometric. It can build on itself with a great pace. It can take in directions we do not anticipate. Anybody well versed in the Vedas will yawn, because this is a certainty in our Indic tradition of thought that we will not be terribly surprised. Though, of course, as being good secular Hindus, we have forgotten all this, as we had to, in order to become good people. Now, what is it that AI is going to do? I would like to say, whenever we talk about AI, I think about one other aspect, which is implicit rather than explicit in discussion. I think about quantum computing. Quantum computing and AI together is revolutionary in a way which is quite extraordinary. To just give you a random example, if you had a maze and you asked the computer to find your way through the maze, the computer would go through every possibility one by one. And a good computer would do it over time. But such a task, AI in combination with quantum computing, by applying the principle of uncertainty, will leap into it in hours what would have taken thousands of years in conventional computing. Thousands of years. So really, we are in a new ball game altogether. We really need to understand the sheer magnitude of what is coming. And I'm afraid I don't understand it as well as many other people, except I sense this is something spectacular. This is going to launch us into a kind of virtual universe in the way we have launched ourselves into the real universe beyond our own planet. This is a big deal, and I think Rajiv has made that very clear repeatedly in his book. Let me come down to earth now with a very mundane view of the economics. And here I will try to sketch a very basic model, not as a certain absolute outcome, but what the conventional tools tell us about the impact of AI. And I'm broadly speaking sympathetic to this model, though I find some very distinguished people are saying this model no longer holds for modern technological change, of which AI is a significant part. So a lot of people are saying the conventional model is not adequate. They may be right, but I'm not yet 100% convinced myself, so I have an open mind on this. All technological change, as we know from the history of Luddites, was opposed. People broke up machines because it took away jobs. And in principle, AI is not different. It is very similar. But I think the scale and the decimation of what it will accomplish is phenomenal. All repetitive jobs which occur on a large scale will be the subject of intervention for AI. Repetitive jobs. So now if you have children, do not tell them to go into the law. Do not tell them to go into accounting. And I fear a big chunk of medicine is going to go the same way, because AI will simply, by absorbing information on an unimaginable scale, simply replace human error, and whatever errors it makes will be far fewer. The capacity will simply eliminate. Already we have some of evidence of this happening. People love to talk about cars. This is fantastic. Artificial intelligence combined with cars, the Chinese are leading in simply because they have collected so much data by diktat, by doing face recognition and other types of surveillance. They have got more data than anybody else. And this data's power is that it multiplies the impact. It's wonderful. Our cities will be transformed. A good 40% of people won't buy cars. The cars will come to your home and take you from A to B. There'll be no parking problems. We'll have green, we'll have pavements, we won't have people crowding places. But as Rajiv has pointed out and others too, a lot of unemployed drivers from Bihar, Orissa, and elsewhere, Eastern UP. But in economics, when you have technological change, consider my very simple model. Say there are 10 people in the economy, and we have full employment, all 10 are working. Among these 10 people, each of them are producing goods and services which they're exchanging with each other. That's kind of our basic model. Of course, it's not quite like that, because at least 2 of these will be unemployed. Say AI then makes many jobs obsolete and only 6 people are working, and the other 4 are unemployed. That's a big deal, 40% unemployed. But look what happens. Say 6% of the people are getting 100% of the national income as a result. But they have to spend the income. They can't sit on it. And when they spend the income, they buy services and maybe goods the other 4 will be obliged to spend. So the economic model says, even though the number of jobs diminish, the people who are thereby enriched by doing the few jobs available will still have to spend the additional money and income they earn, which will then be the factor which employs other people. Now, this is a simple model. It's broadly been true over time, but I think as the, in fact, current governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, pointed out in a fascinating article which I think people should read, but I don't completely agree with, but all my clever friends agree with. He says this time is different. There will genuinely be a problem with jobs. That may well be so. The problem which arises in such a situation is that we know in any standard economic model, the rich have a higher propensity to save. So these 6 people with all the jobs will not be spending all their money. Their savings ratio may well be 50, 60%, whereas for a poor person, if they're very poor, the savings ratio is 0 to 5, 10. So these savings are withdrawn from demand. And demand is what, as we're discovering with the current economic crisis, is the source of jobs that we make demands. So what happens if these 6 people earning all the money are not spending it, they're deserving it? And that will definitely happen. This creates a huge issue. Now we can say, okay, we'll introduce by decree a maximum working week of 25 hours. This will be good, but that doesn't always work because there are many jobs where different people cannot step in and out. The same people need to have overtime because there are certain skills, certain continuity. So it is not so simple. Yes, it is possible because the working week has fallen over generations. So that may be one part, but only one part of the solution. The real solution is this, an obvious one, which I'm afraid is not possible. The obvious solution is the 6 people should be heavily taxed and the government to engage in massive public spending, which will create jobs. And the kind of jobs we all want. We want people to say, you can now educate yourselves and get a degree at 85. You can now fund all the local theaters in your area. You can have every kind of cuisine because this will be partly funded by the extra taxes. And this is entirely feasible technically, that the governments will tax and they will fund a huge spread of the wonderful thing we want. Everybody will go out and do an hour of gardening to beautify the city. Our creativity is the one thing which is infinite like AI, and we will find ways of doing things and spending that money. The only problem is an insurmountable one. This can only work with a global taxation compact, because taxation is a competitive process and those who can gather more taxes will not agree to cooperate with others, which is the problem we're having with the United States and social media, Apple computers or Facebook, that they are not wanting a global system where the end user country can also tax. So this is a big problem. Always a political problem is what does us in the way we are fighting over territory in a way which is totally counterproductive. This is a very, very big problem. I think we will do it in India. And we have shown that we can do it. Despite everything we can be upset about in India in the last 6 years, if you tot up what this government has achieved, it is phenomenal. What we have achieved in the last 6 years is unparalleled. I can criticize everything that this government has done, but I still say what we have done has not happened in 500, 600 years, in 6 years. Many of these things are not new ideas. These are all things which have been put into motion. Many of these things could have been done better. For example, demonetization could have been done better. We'll do it. But the problem we have, which I hope Rajiv's book will help to resolve, we always come to the table late. We should be at the table now, maybe in 2 years' time. But I fear the way we are, look at the way we are behaving around Delhi. We love to fight about non-issues which hold us back. We should be on the table now. And I fear Rajiv's anxiety that we will come to it. I hope this will not happen. I have a lot of confidence in what I'm seeing and what we have achieved despite our huge constitutional democratic hindrances, which we are obliged to comply with. But I would like to finish on this optimistic note and thank Rajiv for starting this debate. And I hope he'll poke us in our eye one more time to wake us up on another issue. So thank you and namaste.
Thank you, Gautam ji. That was very well put in. And a couple of questions that you have actually raised in your talk. And one is the whole economic model in terms of if there's going to be large scale unemployment, do we kind of look at the socialist model of taxing the people who are earning more of the national income? That's number one. And number two, as the gaps between the haves and have-nots kind of increases, do we kind of get into a situation of social instability within geographies, and do Does this kind of lead into an era of increased geopolitical flux and conflict? I would like to get a few comments from Rajiv ji on these aspects from his perspective.
Thank you, Gautam. You've done a remarkable job of focusing, highlighting, intensifying the issues that I'm raising. And now, let me just say, I too want to be optimistic. After all, I don't want to spend so much effort, energy writing a book on something that is hopeless, foregone conclusion, doomsday. I'm not like that. But I know that to shake up people, wake up people is required in India to get them out of this, everything is fine, chalta hai, we are Vishwa Guru kind of mode. We have to get them out of that, and Indians are very brilliant people. Indians are able to solve these problems, and that is why I'm very hopeful too. And the purpose of this book is actually to stimulate that, so bright people like you can come in and help us sort things out. So I'm also, in the end, I'm also optimistic, but I think we need a shaking up. You mentioned the fight over non-issues. I really share that. I mean, the whole chapter 4 of this book in 9 and 10 are focusing on the useless ways we waste our time, energy, and so on. Now, to Prashant's specific question, I feel that the unequal impact of AI creates disparities among industries. There'll be some industries dying and new industries emerging, but the industries emerging may be in Bangalore and the ones dying may be in Bihar and Odisha, where it's more labor intensive. Geopolitically, China may end up colonizing Pakistan. It probably has already colonized quite a lot of it. It's probably colonizing Africa. So there'll be a kind of a geopolitical battle between USA and China as the new colonizers, like France and England were competing because they had the industrial revolution, other people did not. So they're fighting each other and they're also fighting over colonies. I think that these kind of tectonic shifts are very, very big. Now, regarding this taxation, I like this. But, this also points out that there's a fallacy in going on talking about the so-called youth dividend. I don't think there is a youth dividend. I think there's a huge youth liability, because while the youth have hands to work and brains to work, they also have stomachs to feed. And if they are unemployed, which a lot of them are, then, the liability of stomachs to feed is not bearable. If you look at how many people in India are unemployed, and the unemployment rate is not an accurate one, because there are underemployed people where there's artificial jobs created, or they've been absorbed in some family enterprise. And women who are unemployed are not counted in the unemployment statistics, which is quite, I learned during this research that that's the case in India. So if you look at really the number of people who are productively working for the economy, and a large number who are being supported, they have to be supported for food, whether it's subsidies or electricity, whether it is medical, whether it is education. So many forms of basic social needs are subsidized. So this is a burden on the country. So while taxation will work, the point is that you'll keep burdening a few people to, instead of out of 10, 6 are working, maybe the 6 will end up being 5, maybe end up being 4. So at some point, you have to address the core fundamental issue of overpopulation.
I particularly share with Rajiv this concern about this hype we have about the youth dividend. In fact, the youth dividend is coming to haunt us in Punjab. This is the youth dividend we're getting. These are the angry, unemployed people. And what you said about the political consequences of job loss, etc., that is what's in Punjab, because the incomes in the Punjab have stagnated. Look at the agricultural growth rate, which is lower than the rest of India for the last decade, and is only going to get worse. This is a huge political problem that we will have. But at the same time, the productivity growth of AI will make society as a whole richer, but fewer people will have that resources. It will become richer. I mean, imagine the amount of human labor which is released, which is a form of wealth which has to be deployed. We need high quality governance, democratic governance. A lot of this dispersed money can be deployed to enhance democracy, so it is done locally, and to do productive things, creative things. We don't have to think in terms of white goods in consumption. There are many other things which we increasingly, as we grow richer, we do. We don't keep going to buy new washing machines. We spend our money in this kind of way. This cultural shift will take time. It will happen. I actually have a guarded confidence that India has a deep-rooted subterranean source of inner stability due to cultural factors. You might want to call it fatalism or what have you, but we have a deeper sense of history. And this class struggle business of Naxalism and all this is really a passing phase. that we are prepared to take some punishment. I see this in Nepal. Ordinary people are prepared to take a lot of punishment. But of course, there must be positive change, and it must be driven partly by policymakers.
I would like to move our presentation to discussion to the next aspect, which is the battlefield of artificial intelligence and the future geopolitics. To speak on this, we've got Lieutenant General Anjan Mukherjee. He's a PhD, MPhil, Master in Labor Law, PG, DHRM, and DHL Distinguished Fellow at St. Joe's. He's a 1973 batch artillery officer. He has worked in the artillery and tanks as well as the army aviation. So he's kind of looked at warfare from multiple dimensions. And he rose to become the DG of financial planning and went on to become DG of artillery in early 2012. He was the director of the National Defense College in Delhi, and that has trained strategically with the senior military leadership of virtually every armed force in the world, with possibly the exception of China and Pakistan. And he has also been instrumental in driving the concept to induction for the medium artillery gun Dhanush and the Sharang, and he's also a prolific writer himself of military-related books. So welcome, General Anjan.
Thanks a lot. Jai Hind to everybody. I will get into the subject with two examples. The first example is my number of meetings with the present Defense Secretary, Mr. Ajay Kumar, in 2019, when I was a senior consultant and advisor to the Ordnance Factory Board, Ministry of Defense. He is an ex-IIT Kanpur and did his PhD also from there. An IAS officer, of course. Presently, he is a Defense Secretary. Earlier, he was the Secretary of Defense Production. In every meeting, he would say, what are we going to do with AI? AI is going to be the biggest threat and biggest support for our armed forces. And if we are missing out with the time, the loss is ours, we will never able to fulfill. And such kind of things can come only from intellectuals who are coming from IITs and things like that. A general IAS officer has never spoken to me in these terms. I had IAS officers as my student. Even Bipin Rawat, the CDS, has been my student in the National Defense College. Now, the second part of my presentation that I want to bring out is when I was getting into design and manufacture of this Dhanush gun, first of its kind, Atmanirbhar Bharat you can call today, but I started this in 2010. I got stuck at many places. And at this point in time, somebody from Calcutta, one person from Indian Institute of Management and my relative who works in Indian Statistical Institute, they brought in artificial intelligence resolutions of my problems. Mathematical modeling, supported with the actual modeling, and finally, what problems we're facing, getting a solution. So, I want to bring out is that artificial intelligence already come in the armed forces, in the manufacturing, and now we are trying to bring in artificial intelligence in our tactical, strategic, and operational planning. So much so for the military issues. But when we are talking about the artificial intelligence at geopolitical level, my biggest concern is where are we landing up to? My one point, and one of the discussions where I'm been advising some organizations has been that military think tank. So they said, psychological warfare, how do we use artificial intelligence? And we did a small study ourselves. And all of us lieutenant generals who have been exposed to these kind of things. One person was head of the military intelligence also. And we realized so much we can do with the artificial intelligence in subterranean methods in psychological warfare. And we could cut cost, expand our reach, and be able to infiltrate the mind and heart of the people whom we want to. So Chinese in geopolitical space, they have done much better than this. Look at what they have done in Uyghur, what they have done in Hong Kong, and anywhere else where they work. Even this, they are using this artificial intelligence all the way up in USA and Europe. If Europe has come and shaken hands recently in the business, some kind of negotiations, a lot of work would have been done by artificial intelligence, which we don't know. So from the geopolitical level, I feel that this is a subject which requires a tremendous amount of study, analysis, application, and our ability to take the best out of it. But at the same time, geopolitically, it will bring in a different world to live in. We all accept that. Rajiv ji will support me. It may ultimately land up to becoming a machine living, being influenced in our mind, in our soul, to work in a manner what our leaders want us to do. This is happening in China. And I met one or two Chinese very senior officers in Fort William, Calcutta in one of the meetings way back in 2013 when I was in the service. They were talking about using artificial intelligence in their defense planning. They don't talk more than that. They all speak English, but they will never say that they know English. So, from my point of view, and my argument is, the artificial intelligence has got tremendous use for us in the armed forces, management of the geopolitics among the committee of the nations. But if the public trust on their own governance goes away due to the influence by artificial intelligence, where do we land up? This is something we need to understand, be able to penetrate and find a method that we need to collaborate to come to an answer. And we cannot leave artificial intelligence in the books anymore. We need to apply the artificial intelligence to our advantage and advantage of others, but others are also working the same manner that we're talking. And that's all I have to say, only 5 minutes. A subject which one can talk a lot. Thanks a lot, Prashant. Thanks a lot.
One of the things that, for example, China does in their Marxist and the socialist construct of India, and this is something that Rajiv would be very aware of, is that China views India not as one nation, but as multiple sub-nationalities, and there are fault lines over here. And the engineering of conflict is going to be one of those things which Rajiv has himself written extensively about in many of his studies. Gautam and many other people on the panel here are acutely aware of the nature of this problem.
The whole chapter 4 is on this. The whole idea of it's not something futuristic. It is happening now. It is not only China doing it. This is what Google Devta, Twitter Devta, and Facebook Devta are doing. This is the Americans also doing it. It's American government doing this. This is why Edward Snowden is out there, because he exposed all this. So this business of hacking the mind, building a model of your mind using your own data, gamifying you, What the Chinese are doing with the Muslims is called gamification. This is a AI term, gamification, making a game, rewarding certain behavior, punishing certain behavior, monitoring what you do, what posts will appear on my screen and what posts will appear on your screen are different because our profiles are different. How to make me behave a certain way, where I'm likely to behave or not behave. All that is very personalized, and also different communities, different ethnic groups, different faiths, different regional groups, how to make them fight each other. This is what whole psychological warfare, moronization of the masses, this is what it's all about. It's not a military thing anymore. This is societal. This is a societal breakdown. The adhikar is gone to these devatas, these digital giants. So, I'm calling this Breaking India 2.0. This is why 5 years ago, I started withdrawing from this whole Breaking India discourse and all that. Let others talk about, Naxals and, evangelists and all. I sort of withdrew from that because I was developing where this is going the next generation. This is a next generation warfare is AI based. The whole breakup of India into communities and making them fight each other, which was the Breaking India thesis, has now gone into artificial intelligence. So this is a huge topic. In fact, this is not a 1 or 2 sentence matter. This is the heart of the whole thesis in this book that Prashantji, you've read. So I would say that the discussion on hacking the mind, manipulating the mind, making people fight, making people happy, all of that remotely controlled by foreign nexuses is the calamity India is facing because Indians haven't realized it. We did not create our own digital platforms the way China created their own digital platforms. We sold a large part of Geo to Google and Facebook and thought we are heroes because we must be very important. They're buying us out, but actually India is for sale. India's digital assets, big data, is for sale. Those guys, the digital giants in the US, know more about us than we know about ourselves. I will tell you that. So their ability to play havoc in alignment with Breaking India forces is huge. So it's more than just a simple psychological warfare.
I will take on my take about the artificial intelligence is managing the heart and mind of people across the world. Now, this is a very big statement I'm making. But if you bring down to scientists at one side, the teachers at the other side, and the military men somewhere, if the mind and the heart works in a similar direction, then the nation gets benefited. If the system is brought in a manner that at least 50% or 30% people, their thinking gets divergent, the heart gets affected, the nation becomes weak. And I leave it to that.
I cannot stress enough the importance of what Rajiv has just said in a few sentences. This to me is the future. But this is not new. We are just applying modern technology to an old phenomenon. If you look at the expansion of the church in the 4th century Rome, it was ideology. But the key thing that I would like to add to this, we overestimate education, vastly overrated. The key is socialization, and AI allows you, as Rajiv has just said, to socialize on a grand scale. It is already a reality, but the scale and intensity is in a different sphere. And I will give you one final example. I have many friends who are professors of the top Ivy League universities, Cornell, Columbia, Chicago, some of whom have been writing in favor of the farmers' dispute. They are good friends of mine. I've known since I was a child. When I hear them speak, I hear the New York Times, the Washington Post, Google search. So what Rajiv has said in chapter 4 is actually the heart of the matter, the seizure of the human mind by third parties, and it is now so easy.
Not only is Gautam absolutely right, but going back to the first question, Prashant, you asked me why I wrote the book. This is why I wrote the book. I mean, there's a lot of stuff written in this, but I wrote the book because I see our own, the Hindu activists, Hindutva activists, giving big data to these very digital giants that are colonizing us. So the why are they giving us free services? I mean, I asked this to all these fellows who are got great YouTube channels, these Hindu activists, they come out of nowhere in the last 5-10 years, using this Breaking India thesis to get ahead, get more likes and more subscribers. And they're very popular people. And the point is that they haven't gone deep enough to understand that they are being gamified. They are being gamified. So now these giants, the digital giants, as I call them, using machine learning, neural networks, artificial intelligence, know how to gamify one person. I don't want to name them. Person A to fight B, B to fight C. How A will get more tweets, B will get shadow banned. All this is algorithmically driven. I'm myself a student of this. My own this particular episode, I will guarantee you, we will get a notice from YouTube that it violates community standards. Who the heck are they to tell us community standards? I did a panel on the AI in the military with Air Vice Marshal Bahadur and General Pannu. And we got a notice from these guys saying that you're violating our standards. Why? How are Indians talking to Indians about India? Somebody sitting elsewhere is deciding whether it violates some standards or not. This is horrible. And this is now being done in the name of social justice. The whole movement called social justice is a certain ideology, which is the idea of justice in the social justice is not the same thing as Vedic idea of dharma and justice. Our idea of justice is different. Their idea of justice is different. They put their idea of justice into the machine learning algorithms to decide which post is a violation, which post is good. Okay, so the bias in machine learning is huge, and the blacks are talking about it, the LGBTQ people are talking about it, the feminists are talking about it. It's high time Hindus talked about it. And in this book, I started writing all this stuff long before this Twitter ban, and long before people started realizing, oh my God, these people are becoming too powerful. This is now, Indians are now reacting to something I've been talking about privately to a whole lot of people in the government for a long time, that you have to watch these people. They should be accountable in India, in an Indian court. An Indian should be able to go and say, you have no right to ban me and prefer that guy and slander me, because if you are doing it, if you are controlling the content according to your standards, then you should be liable as per media liability. Now, in the United States, there's something called Article 230, which gives protection to the digital community from liability on content. Because the assumption was that they're very fragile, they're young, it's a new industry. 30 years ago, these things were like that. But today, they are not fragile, they're not young, they are giants, they are the richest people in the world. There is no reason to protect them from liability on content. So in the United States, you cannot take Facebook to task on content violation, because they'll say that we are just a free and all that kind of stuff. So this is being debated in the US. In India, they just started the debates. And this is the most important reason I wrote the book, this particular point.
Yes, in the US, they have silenced a president. So
yes.
It's gone way beyond anyone's wildest imagination. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Prithvis Mukherjee with us. Prithvis, hello, and good to see you again after a long time. Prithvis was a senior contemporary of mine from IIT Kharagpur. He's an engineering graduate from the 1984 batch there. And he did his master's and PhD in management sciences from UT at Dallas. And he's worked on the corporate side of in India on IT, software, and the management consulting side at Tata Steel, Tata IBM, PricewaterhouseCoopers, where he was the partner, and in IBM, where he was the head of the delivery center in Kolkata. Prithvis was also a full-time tenured professor at the School of Management in IIT Kharagpur, the Vinod Gupta School, and he's listed among the top 10 prominent analytic academicians by the Analytics India magazine. One of the things about Prithvis is that he's written in a genre of science fiction on AI, and not just with the human civilization, but also its interactions with a larger cosmic citizenry. And his books, Chrono Tantra, Chrono Yantra, and the third one, which is Chrono Mantra in the pipeline, are dealing on this. And he's also done a significant amount of work in introducing um, some aspects in Second Life, and I'll ask him to talk a little bit about that. But more importantly, in terms of the loss of selfhood, is it a crash of civilization? Welcome, Rajesh.
Thank you, Prashant. And it's a real pleasure to be on this platform and hear so many interesting views about artificial intelligence. I have a point of view, and Second Life being one of them. It goes like this. There are two things that we would like to keep in mind. While a lot of people think that computers and AI is all about algorithms, the real thing is it is not so. The magic lies not in the algorithm, but in the data. Okay, the same algorithm, the backpropagation and stochastic gradient descent, will be worthless unless you have the data. So the magic lies in the data, and that is why the data is called the new oil. Now, when I look at data, I think of, and I go back in time. Data is one level. Then you have information. Then you have wisdom, and then you have insight. So there's a hierarchical, aggregation of data as it moves upwards. And if you go really upwards, I think of a concept which is perhaps a very Indic concept, the concept of Shiv being pure knowledge, the consciousness. So in the essence, it is knowledge that is the universe, and of which Maya, or the so-called misinterpretation, some people call it illusion, or is what we see around us. So at the heart of it all is something called knowledge, and around it there is a fuzzy mass of what we see. Okay. Now, one of the best examples of this in the Western literary context is the movie Matrix, where they say there is everything is an illusion which is fed into our brains. Now, this illusion is something we think it's very far away, it's in Matrix or somewhere. But if you look up at any computer game, you can begin with PUBG, the violent game from China, or you can look at something pleasant like Second Life, where you can create your own avatars and you can create your own environment. So this is simulation, and simulation is all about information. So are we living in a simulation? Is the bottom line information, and we are living in a simulation? And is intelligence or consciousness an emergent phenomena which emerges out of information and manifests itself as consciousness and intelligence? This is my worldview, and this is the worldview that I've articulated in my science fiction novels. I call them novels because I do not write papers, so I cannot give justification, this and that. It's my own intuition. Now, coming to that, the biggest threat to this point of view is a simulation needs a hardware to run on. You cannot have a simulation running as pure information. Somewhere there has to be a piece of silicon somewhere down there where it works. Now, this is the main thing. We believe that information depends on matter, but could it be that matter depends on information? What is more primordial? What is more fundamental? Is it matter or is it information? Now, we believe that the main thing is matter, atoms, electrons, the whole works, quarks, whatever. And information is something which rides on matter. But there are two very interesting theories. One, if you look at Shannon's information theory and the Shannon entropy. And the other is Boltzmann's theory of thermodynamics and Boltzmann's entropy. And you will be amazed that the two equations are identical. So Boltzmann's entropy and Shannon's entropy are two sides of the same coin, which brings us to the equivalence of information and energy, which in turn makes information and matter as the two sides of the same coin, if not information being the primary thing, which sinks in with my view of Shiv being the ultimate source of knowledge and information. So based on this, we come to the conclusion, that, where does this information there? I know we have a human civilization, which is, organic, it's carbon based. Along with us, there is a silicon based civilization emerging next to us. So silicon civilization and our carbon civilization, well, they're like a species which is emerging next to us. And maybe in another 50 years or so, we will be living with a silicon civilization, just as, at some point in time, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, and they lived in parallel with each other until one of them died away. I'm not saying one of us will die away, but we will operate in parallel. And this is very important. See, humans and earthbound civilization is just a small speck. There are a billion of galaxies and trillions of planets. So I'm quite sure that Shiv's information manifests itself in some other place, in some other form. Okay, I don't know them. We can't reach them as yet. So actually, it is the manifestation of the Shiv's information. We see it up to a point. The silicon civilization sees it up to a point. The gorillas see it up to a point. And of course, some boron-based civilization, God knows, somewhere on Alpha Centauri, we'll see somewhere else. It is all that information which comes together, and that is the key. Information is the key, and it's just not big data. Big data, and it's a very small part of the whole story. We are looking at information, and AI and intelligence is a manifestation of this information, which Indians have seen long before as Shiv and its Maya and the energy which flows out of it. So Shiv, Shakti, Maya, illusion, this is where we are. We are that. That's where my point of view is. And that's what I have been trying to put together in my novels. Obviously, I can't prove all of this together. So, I cannot write a paper on this, but novel, I have my liberty of saying what I want, which is why I like these novels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prithvi. Very profound and very deep. And this actually maps into the analogy that you gave about the two models of entropy. And entropy is a fascinating thing because as we kind of get into machine-to-machine communications and machine-to-machine based decisions playing an increasingly larger and a bigger and a more obtrusive role in everything we do, the entropy is actually going to rise. And that's possibly one of the areas where Rajiv has dwelt upon in terms of the proliferation of choices, and some of them could be catastrophic choices, which could be very much in the realm of non-viable choices. But given the fact that machines may have some of these areas, so I would like Rajiv to kind of respond to the whole flow of civilization.
Yeah, thank you very much. What Prithvi just mentioned is actually quite well known for a long time. Movie Matrix, even before the movie Matrix came out, people have talked about it. And this whole idea of consciousness being primary and information, and now it's a large topic. It's been discussed, or everything he said has been discussed a lot for a long time. My views are very large and complex, and I think time is very short. I've written a chapter 5 on this, the battle for self, but I'm taking it. I'm not rehashing what has been out there in the public space for a while. This kind of speculation on the nature of consciousness and Shiva and all that. Yeah. I'm actually trying to take it forward in my own position I'm taking, which is not necessarily the same as the positions that people have been taking for a while. I'm asking fundamental questions. Is the laws of physics are like algorithmic. They say this is the algorithm of how the electron will behave. And if it behaves, then the law is correct. If it's not, then the law is falsified and a better law comes about. This is how tides will come. This is how gravitation works. So the functioning of nature explained in algorithms is what we call physics. That is what it is, the discovery of natural algorithms. That nature has some algorithms. It behaves what we call order. And that is why physics is even possible, because things repeat themselves and you can have empirical proof by repeating an experiment. So there is certainly a algorithmic part of the cosmos. The cosmos has a lot of algorithms, but cosmos is also being. So my book, the whole part 1 is called Algorithm versus Being. It's called Algorithm versus Being because I'm raising this issue and going very deep into it. That ultimately, are we algorithms? Are we beings? Is the algorithm controlling the being? Is the being creating algorithms? And what is the relationship between the two? And as the cosmos, so the microcosm. So in us also as individuals is the same issue of consciousness versus algorithmic, repetitious, physics-driven, physics-based, mechanical behavior. So the issues are very profound. The issues are very complex. To me, the conversation should go further into the future, deeper than these ideas that have been there for a very long time. I mean, the ideas that he expressed exist, and we've hashed them for the last 25 years in a lot of forums. I would like to take the conversation beyond all that.
We actually move into the next part of our presentation, which kind of gets into the flow over here. And I'm very, pleased to introduce the youngest panel of our panelist of our, discussion today with us. And it's an honor for me to introduce Dr. Pratosh from IIT Delhi. Dr. Pratosh is a 2011 bachelor graduate in electronics from the Vishwesvaraya Technological University. And after his bachelor's, he directly did his PhD. In 2014, he finished his PhD from Indian Institute of Science in the area of signal processing and machine learning. Dr. Pratosh is an involved teacher and a researcher interested in enabling the joy of creative expression and knowledge. He's a part of the computer technology group at IIT Delhi and works on exciting areas in the crossroads of electrical and computer engineering. Dr. Pratosh studied in the Gurukul system. He's fluent in Sanskrit, AI, and the cognitive traditions of the Indian knowledge systems because of the exposure he's had in the traditional Gurukul system. He's been a prolific researcher and has several patents and is working in areas of wearable technology, getting technology closer to the manas, chitta, ahankar, and the subtle domains of the human body and its interactions. And it's a honor and a privilege to speak and hear your views, Pratosh.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure to meet you people and Rajiv. I've been a big fan of yours. We discuss your book on Battle for Sanskrit in all our traditional Sanskrit scholastic debates. It's such a nice thing to know that you have placed your foot on my professional front also. Where you have written a book on Battle for AI too. It was a very important thing that you did on Need of the Hour. Let me start with a nice shloka that comes in a lot of Puranas. They say, Nadeva dandamadaya pashuvat palayantitam yam rakshanti buddhya sanyojayantitam. So the summary is the following. If devas want to protect somebody, they don't bring a stick, and mend the person like they mend an animal. So all they do is tweak the intelligence. Yam tu rakshitum ichanti buddhya sanyojayanti tam. So all they have to do is tweak your intelligence, right? So as Rajiv has very nicely mentioned, all this AI is trying to do. I mean, see again, the question that I was posed for this panel discussion was: is AI making people morons? Outsourcing intelligence, is AI making people morons? Well, that's a very loaded question for which I don't give a binary answer, but I'll state some facts that I've observed as a faculty in IIT. So my view is the following: as long as AI does not place its foot in the realm of humans' viveka, I again like Rajiv Ji's Sanskrit non-translatable series, where there are lots of words in Sanskrit that cannot be easily translated to English, and Viveka is one such word. See, now what is Viveka? In Sanskrit it is said that Yukta Chinta is Viveka. So the ability to judge what is right and what is wrong, that is what is called as Viveka. If you start using your AI, to recommend what somebody is eating, what somebody should eat, what somebody should listen to, what somebody should watch, and so on, all you are trying to do is to bring your, influence the very viveka of a human being. Again, it was so nice to hear Professor Mukherjee talking about unification of intelligence, but I differ academically slightly there, because there is a fundamental difference between what is called as a jada and a chetana in Indian traditional knowledge systems. So what is a chetana? By chetana, they call something or somebody who has the jnana, ichha and prayatna as chetana. Okay. So now AI, again, if you take the famous definition of Tom Mitchell, who defined what machine learning was, he said machine learning is development of algorithms that improve through experiences. The question is, even though you can bring in some kind of jnana, even that is a debatable thing, but I say in my class that, okay, some kind of jnana can be brought in using AI, but these two other dimensions of the chetana, which are the ichha and prayatna, at least I believe that those two are the things that cannot be brought into the so-called AI. The lieutenant was just mentioning a while ago that AI finds a lot of application in defense and so on. And I do have to work on a lot of problems with defense. However, those are the kinds of applications where somebody has to think of AI. And one other thing that I keep telling people is that, see, AI is not new, in the sense that if you are a practitioner of AI and who has read previous textbooks and so on, you know that it is just the rebranding of same technology that was there. But what has changed, as Professor Mukherjee was mentioning, was the availability of so much of data that you can use to influence the very vivek of human beings. And there is a very nice saying by this Subhashitakara, Bhartruhari, where he says, all you have to do is tweak or change the vivek of a person to make him doom. He says, viveka bhrashtanam bhavati vinipataha shatamukhaha. So now, if you make a person devoid of his very viveka, then the kind of problems that he can get into is hundreds. There are 100 avenues to, even in Bhagavad Gita it says, vyavasayatmika buddhihi ekeha kurunantana bahushakha anantascha buddhihi avyavasayinam. So if you want to get into wrong path, there are hundreds of ways to do it. So now, yeah, so basically my point is that if you ask me a binary question, whether AI is making people morons, it's very difficult to give a binary answer. However, I have observed this over my tenure in IIT Delhi, that the kind of general intelligence that students, IITians used to have 10 years before, or maybe even 5 years before, is not the case anymore. Now my courses on AI is extremely oversubscribed. So what has happened is, if there are say 1,000 students in a university like IIT, everybody wants to take an AI course. The question is why? My other colleagues who are actually teaching other branches of engineering and science do not get students. All of these people, they want to get an AI on their transcript. What is the reason? It is creating such a bad skew in the society that nobody is there to do other branches of engineering, but everybody is looking at AI because it's such a big fad. Rajiv just nicely used the term that the devatas of digital world. Those are the people who have created this kind of fad in the society. Now, what is more interesting is that all these students who come to my courses, all they want is an AI mark in their transcript, but they do not want to know the fundamentals of AI. In the sense that whenever I try to teach the rigorous mathematics behind AI, they shy away. They say that don't teach this. We don't need this. All we need is to take XYZ algorithm and put it to ABC applications, and we are done with it. Why are you even teaching how does an AI algorithm is doing what it is doing? Because when companies employ these graduates, by and large, they want these people to just use the algorithm and make their thing get done, but not asking why is this algorithm doing what it is doing. So when you can already see, is AI making people morons. I don't give a binary answer again, but at least I have seen my students that the kind of questions that people were asking, the kind of rigor that IITians used to bring onto the table is largely missing. So yeah, so that's what it is. So just to conclude, as long as your AI is not putting its hand in the very Viveka space of human intelligence, it's fine. You put it into defense applications, healthcare applications, and all other critical applications. Now, as we are talking, we are actually using AI to under this Zoom's platform. I know that how Zoom uses AI, so there is a lot of use for AI. But for AI, we couldn't even have this conversation. Different people sitting at different places of the world. However, it's like, to conclude, I would say that use it like a knife. Just because you have a knife, you don't have to stab everywhere in your body, right? Just use it judiciously, and it has its advantages and its disadvantages too. And yeah, so let me stop there. Or maybe just I'll give you one example that I thought I should give. See, all of you perhaps know that traditionally the Vedic scripture was preserved by this tradition of Shruti. Okay, so people were talking of Shannon entropy, right? There are these things called Vikritis of Veda Samhita. So basically, there was no written scripture. So what people were doing is you have to remember a certain text. That is the task. So now, how do you remember? Of course, somebody chants it and you just listen to it and you remember it. So what if somebody makes a mistake? See, now there is this whole field of mathematics in communication engineering called error correction codes. So where when you transmit an information from a transmitter to a receiver, if there is a mistake or a correction in the channel, so you have multiple checks to make sure that the code that is transmitted from the transmitter is correctly received in the receiver. So now our rishis have discovered this kind of error correction codes, for which I have tried to put in some Shannon entropy kind of interpretation, where you can show that these vikritis, which are nothing but the error correction codes that the rishis have come up with to protect the very sanctity or the correctness of these Veda Samhitas. So people were remembering these Vedas, not only the text, but also the corresponding Vikritis, which are the error correcting codes too. Now, what has happened is, as the technology has come, I'm just talking about, in general, an example for technology, people started printing these texts and nobody is using those error correcting codes to preserve the text. Now, somebody who came up with the idea of those error correcting codes were obviously more intelligent than people who are just remembering it. So this is one example of technology spoiling. Nobody studies Vikritis today, by the way. People who are actually studying the Vedas with the corresponding Vikritis, the number of people is diminishing day after day because the printed Vedic text is readily available. So this is one just traditional example that I give where intelligence of technology lot of times can actually cause harm than the good things that it does. So with that, I shall conclude. And again, thanks a lot for the opportunity. It was a pleasure talking in this esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was hoping that Pratosh would give a cogent thesis or a cogent point of view, but he sort of, I could not figure out what his thesis is, what's his point, because he gave a lot of information here and there, and examples are all correct, but I didn't see a position with clarity. I want to leave a couple of questions for him because he's a smart guy, and maybe we need to have a one-on-one session later on. So I will leave a couple of questions for him, and the questions I want him to work on very specifically are that the pragmatics, and you should read chapter 5 of this book, please, in detail, and then we should have discussion. The pragmatics of artificial intelligence have empowered the mechanistic model of person, the mechanistic biology as a machine that can be modeled as an algorithm and then replicated in silicon, and then you have an artificial heart and liver and brain and whatnot. You can 3D print. According to this technology, you can 3D print a human being and you get a person. So I'm raising really profound issues, not all this stuff here and there, example of this and that. That we know. We already know that. I am pushing you beyond quoting things from, Smritis and Shrutis. I'm asking you to use your thoughts, come up with your position using whatever text you want to, but you have to come up with your position. That is, a straightforward question I would want somebody like that to address is, if you 3D print a human, will that be a conscious being or not? I'm asking a question. I want you to think about it. Certainly, you can clone mechanically. You can clone in a test tube, and you will get a creature that is conscious. So that is also mechanically produced. It's so if you build up bottom up one elementary particle at a time and build up to a whole cell, and so on and up, you make a whole creature in the laboratory. It seems like you're able to create a conscious being. So I want to provoke that where the edges are. Where is the edge of knowledge? I want to provoke that the pragmatics, the victory of AI. See, here is here is a dilemma and the crisis in Rajiv. My crisis is, all my life I have practiced consciousness, spirituality, and meditate, and consciousness is primary, and all of those things you guys are saying about. I've believed in it, practiced it, and millions of people believe in all that. But here comes AI, which has not used any viveka, not used any consciousness, but purely an algorithmic modeling of systems and intelligence taking over the world, making the majority of human beings surplus. So where is their viveka? Is it that we are dumb and we don't use viveka, and present society has such a tiny amount of viveka being used that the machine can replace it? The fact that the machine can replace people without the machine having viveka is actually a disgrace for the level of human beings we have. It means that the present level of human beings are so lousy that a machine without viveka is able to get rid of them and outsmart them. So the crisis of moronization has to be looked upon in it's a very profound crisis. It's a very profound crisis. How is it possible that a mechanistic model of biology and the mechanistic model of living things is able to become so powerful? And let's not worry about whether it's at the level of the Rishi and all. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 99% of human beings. We're talking about 99% of human beings and 99% of what constitutes the work and the activities of human beings. If AI is able to disrupt that, and in many cases outsmart it or certainly augment it, then what does it tell you about the state of humanity? This is a very serious crisis that I'm having. The computer scientist in me says, look, we won. In 1970, when I was a graduate student, we were just writing chess programs, simple things. But now, 50 years later, my profession has gone so far ahead. And this is huge. But the spiritualist in me says that we, the meditators, what happened? What can we put on the table and say, this is the accomplishment that we made towards human society? So this debate, this clash between the Rishi and the algorithm, is really a very profound clash. So I was hoping that you would talk about that. So we need to have more conversation. I know that Prashant ji will say that we run out of time, and maybe we need to have. We need to have thematic specific. I think taking on 5 themes with so many experts on different themes is kind of overambitious. This very theme of who are we, algorithm or being, is a very important question worth discussing for 2 hours at least.
Yes, I think we should follow up on this into a more detailed brief. I agree with Rajiv. This requires a deeper exploration, and I think defining the AI stack from the dharma perspective.
Yes.
The fusion of the manas, of the tan and the yantra, which is AI. And its ability to kind of work. Pratosh, you want to say something very quickly?
Just a minute. The question that Rajiv was asking, isn't it the question of defining what a Chetana is? The very question that Turing asked.
No, let it be what. Let the question be. Let me be a very cynic towards my own tradition, because it's good to be cynical towards yourself. Be a little humble. So I'm from the Vedic tradition. Now I put myself as an AI guy, cynical towards Vedic tradition. I'm saying, what will the Vedic tradition add value if we as an AI industry are able to keep replicating more and more of human beings Okay, you can keep defining what is Chetna, all of that, but in pragmatic terms, a very large, if you took a pyramid of human beings from the rishi at the top to the completely lousy person at the bottom, and maybe the AI is starting at the bottom and replacing human beings with mechanized alternatives and going gradually to the top. Maybe it will never touch the rishi level, but we don't have too many rishis right now. Yeah. So in terms of the pragmatics of 8 billion human beings on the planet, if 99% of them are below the level of AI's potential, it's a matter of funding and scaling and investment, but AI will take over a large part of those people's capabilities. And maybe we'll need social policies and political policies, like Gautam said, to taxation to keep these guys alive, to keep the majority of human beings alive. But in terms of technological feasibility, if you say AI has beaten most of humanity, then whatever we may think of Chetna, what does this say about Vedic tradition? And Vedic tradition in terms of not its ability, its status in the age of the rishis, but today. What does it say about today's humanity vis-a-vis Vedic tradition? Is it obsolete for today? This is the kind of provocation I'm giving in this book. And this is why so many gurus I approached said, I don't want to come and talk. They did not want to come out and talk about it. And it is a very serious guru issue, spiritual issue.
Yes, it is a serious question.
It is a serious issue. But I think that what Prashant has done is brilliantly bring out the range of issues so huge. In a couple hours, you can't solve them. Each of the battlegrounds took me years to churn and figure out and crystallize the questions also. Each of those battlegrounds is a topic in itself, is my sense. And let's hear from Gautam, please.
Actually, this part of the discussion was obscure for me because of lack of expertise. But from my perspective of somewhat amateur reading of philosophy, I think actually this issue of the algorithm and its relation to being is of fundamental importance, because this will allow you to unpackage the pragmatic, practical aspect which Rajiv talks about, of how it is being built up to impact the human race. So these two things actually are interlinked, and my gut feeling is that this original question actually needs to be investigated, and maybe we have some kind of traditional and intellectual advantage in delving into this. I can't understand exactly how these two will be related, but I think they are. And something which Rajiv said, which I was saying as well myself independently of him, but is fundamental to what we do now, which is kind of my concluding remark. We need a mission on this. A mission not just like ISRO and atomic energy. We need a mission on a massive scale. A very important industrialist spent $100 million for his daughter's wedding. I think we, could make do with 10,000 crores, which is 10 times more than this. The dispute in the Shimbu border has cost us 50,000 crores. Hey, Bhagwan, this much we can deploy for pure research. And as Rajiv says, and I agree with him very much on this, we actually have the intellectual and brain power in India.
Yes.
That's to organize and deploy. I want just final comment. AI will give us this one thing, which we have all kind of touched on and agree, I think, massive boost in productivity. We will be richer. But how do we deal with the consequence of the wealth, and how do we deploy it is a political decision.
Right.
To add to this, I think we kind of move on to the last topic. It kind of sets up very nicely in terms of how do we stress test the Indian Rashtra. I would like Rajiv here to kind of share with us what are the kind of frameworks and endowments, so to speak, in the Indian and the Dharma Hindu knowledge system, which could be the cornerstones to help stress test the Indian Rashtra against such a universal assault that's going to take place.
Thank you, Prashant. So I'll do it in two parts. First, I will give you my very quick version of the stress test I did in this book. And second, I'll tell you what I'm writing in a sequel, which is the solution, because a stress test produces an outcome that says India is really in trouble, having started late in this game. But then there is using our traditions, using our own knowledge systems, which AI has not utilized. How do we leapfrog ahead? That is what my next book is, and it's almost done. And I would just want to leave a few months gap so that people can understand the problem, and then they'll appreciate the solution also. So the first part, my stress test of India, of the Rashtra. So when we talk about an individual body, our tradition says there is the Sthula Sharir, the Sukshma Sharir, and the Karan Sharir. I'm applying these three terms, the three levels of body, to the Rashtra. The Rashtra has a Sthula Sharir, which means physical body. The Rashtra has a Sukshma Sharir, which means the mental, psychological, emotional body. And the Rashtra has a Karan Sharir, which means karmically, are we righteous? Are we dharmic? What is the karmic effect of what we are doing? And the stress test will tell us whether in each of these three, whether we are robust or whether we are in trouble. So as far as the Sthula Sharir of Rashtra is concerned, in terms of international physical military, that's part of the Sthula Sharir. My position is that China, what General Mukherjee said, that the Defense Secretary told him in 2019 that we are going to do a lot of these things on AI. Now, 2019, just a year ago, year and a half ago, still talking about future tense, we are going to do. Compare that with China 15, 20 years ago, they set the target that by 2025, they will be the number one country in the world in AI. And the United States is afraid that they're actually achieving that. And this is why there is this big war between the US and China going on. It's all AI. Actually, it's AI, 5G, quantum computing. When I say AI, I'm referring to a cluster of technologies that include semiconductors, avionics, robotics, drones, all the things that either AI enables or AI brings together and uses them as a force multiplier. So the AI is a cluster of technologies. AI, in a very pure, limited sense, is one part of it that brings all of it together. Sort of like somebody's mind. Somebody's mind brings all the other organs together, So AI means that way. And when you look at the state of India in terms of China, the China-Pakistan combination, what they could do to India, it is not a very good state for India. And then you look at the domestic economy, the level of education, the standard of education we have is not good enough. The industry, the planning commission, these Niti Aayog people, they're quite confused even now, and very late and more reactive to China. And we're still building our AI policy. If you look at what is NASSCOM, which is the computer science body, and Niti Aayog also, you look at what is their AI strategy. It is to basically develop manpower for export and sell brains. Rent Indian brains to Microsoft and Google and consider that to be victory because they'll send repatriations. It is not about building intellectual property and patents and our own knowledge. It's just selling our brains so that other people can build knowledge and they own the knowledge. Then they license it back to us in the Rafael jet and all kind of things. So I feel that at the Sthula Sharir, India's got problems. Sukshma Sharir, that is where psychological warfare comes in. That is where Breaking India 2 comes in. That is where our people are confused. Our people are too beholden to the digital devatas, which are not controlled by India. And our people are chasing the wrong benchmarks of getting retweets, who got more views and who's popular. And that the American algorithms, the American AI algorithms of these digital giants are controlling, your matrimonial prospects, your job prospects, your political prospects, how popular you are, what your friends and family think of you in terms of how well you are doing in social media. And guess what? All of this is controlled by algorithms, which are controlled by people outside India. So this is not a very healthy state of Sukshma Sharir. If your Sukshma Sharir, somebody else pushes buttons and changes your Sukshma Sharir, changes the plight of your Sukshma Sharir, make you happy, make you sad, make you fight each other, then you don't even have sovereignty over your Sukshma Sharir. So I'm afraid that is the state of India. And in this book, I've criticized a lot of Indian policies over the last 5 years, including policies as recently as encouraging Jio to sell out to digital giants and bring them in the door. Bring WhatsApp in the door so that all these transactions happening on WhatsApp, they got all the big data. Rather than spending the big billions of dollars that Reliance has to build an Indian version of Google and an Indian version of Twitter and Facebook, which very few companies in India could do. And they are among the few, they and Tatas and a few others who ought to have been doing it. Rather than renting brains of Indians, for a margin, making arbitrage. Rather than that, they should have been using these brains, Indians' brilliant brains, to make Indian technology and not have to, sell our equity and sell our big data to foreign countries. So the state of Sukshma Sharir is now more and more being controlled by foreign giants. We banned some Chinese, but not all of them. Some of them are like Alibaba owns a whole bunch of Paytm, but they own it through some subsidiary in Singapore or somewhere, so it is not classified as Chinese. So, but the bigger problem is American owned digital giants, and these digital giants are not loyal to anybody. They just, like East India Company was more powerful than the British government. So these digital giants even defy the US government. So there is a recolonization of India at the Sukshma level. Then you look at the current Sharir. You say, okay, but the Devatas promised that we can never be defeated. But the Devatas also told us to do many things which we are not doing. Are we really doing tapasya? Are we really working very hard? Or if you look at the lifestyles of a lot of the ruling elite, and I'm on the side of the masses because they are actually more compliant with our tradition. But the ruling elite, whether it's industry, whether it's the Delhi ruling elite, whether it's media people or whatever, the karma, the level of karma that they are involved in, I don't think that we can be very proud and say that the Devatas are protecting us. So I leave it at that. The stress test of India at the Sthula Sharir level, Sukshma Sharir level, Karan Sharir level leaves me disturbed. So I don't want to sort of give a problem without a solution. Therefore, I have a sequel. And in the sequel, I'm not following the Western model of artificial intelligence, which is based on the materialistic model of what constitutes intelligence. Because once you know what is intelligence, then you can model artificial intelligence. But the fundamental nature of intelligence itself is different according to our tradition. If you look at Sankhya, if you look at Kashmir Shaivism, if you look at these kind of systems, there is a whole different idea of cognition, of perception, of memory, of inference. So the Indian idea of what constitutes intelligence has to be, we have brilliant people in AI who are also Sanskrit people, but they never connected this. Some of the best scholars of Vedas and all that are the same fellows whose day job is AI, but they haven't connected this. That is what I'm trying to get going in this book. I want our people who are really grounded in the Vedic thought and who know about machine learning and neural networks and all that, to question the type of neural network which Western neuroscience has given as the foundation for AI. AI is a marriage of computer science and neuroscience. But the neuroscience that the Westerners have brought is a very mechanical model of brain. So if we were to remove that and replace it with a Vedic model of thinking and intelligence, what kind of AI would we get? That is what this book is demanding as a question, as a problem statement, and that is my next project. That is my stress test and where things are.
Thank you, Rajiv. Fascinating. In fact, the whole fundamental of the 6 schools of Dharma, the Sankhya and the other schools you mentioned are very key. The underlying structure of language, the theory of Spota, and the underlying inherent meaning, which is primordial inside the object structure of the whole cosmos and its relationship with intelligence. I think these are areas where Bharat has to develop its own entire AI stack model. I would like to invite the panel members to give their closing thoughts on this session and the way forward as we kind of go in on the whole future of power and artificial intelligence. That's been the theme over here.
Following up with the question that Rajiv asked, now if AI is so-called more intelligent than the majority of the human race, what is the fate of the human race? One point there is, contrary to all the popular views that people make on AI is still dumb. That would be my. AI is pretty far from what human intelligence is, what human beings do. AI is still dumb. My closing remarks would be that That of course, yeah. So one has to, instead of just looking at AI as one engineering tool, so one has to go to the fundamental questions of what constitutes and defines human intelligence, and why and how is so-called artificial intelligence is different than human intelligence, if it's in fact different, right? Somebody has to definitely marriage the traditional definitions of consciousness, viveka, and intelligence, and the Western definition that people have given, and that's the way forward.
My take is that AI should bring peace, AI should bring more job, AI must bring more happiness. This is the greatest challenge to the mankind, which is being faced today. And we are talking of AI to generate money, and we are talking of AI to make them fight and to do good governance or bad governance. That these are all factual issues. But overall, the scientists and those who are practitioners of AI should be able to concentrate on these issues, which are so fundamental for our living and our future generations.
Yes, I very much second the sentiments of General Mukherjee. And AI, with its immense potential, has the capacity to release us from very large elements of drudgery in our work and other forms of daily life. It can indeed do that. There are many repetitive tasks we do, even though we are good at it. These are not pleasant tasks. It has enormous potential. But of course, we must recognize that human beings what they are, and it will be used for malicious purposes against each other. And we must be defensively prepared.
Well, I just want to thank the panelists. I think they are brilliant people. They are all open-minded. They take challenges, and they're thinking even on their feet right now during the discussion. And Prashant has brought this group together. And kudos to Rashtram organization that is led by brilliant people. And I hope that a lot of the young minds in Rashtram are watching and listening. I just want to say this, that I'm starting this as a movement. I'm not. I don't want a position. I don't want any accolades. I just want somebody. I want Indians to wake up and shake up, and I want to create a mobilization where a lot of young people join and a lot of thought leaders join, and then things move forward. So those of you in Rashtram or anywhere else who are watching, who want to help, go to www.aiandpower.com. and register yourself. Give us your email ID. We want to thank you. We want to send you, we want to include you in Zoom conferences. I'm going to have regular Zoom conferences where we can take these, this 2-hour discussion was too quick, because there's so much to discuss. And I want to invite some of the leaders here and others who are watching to, more detailed conferences, more detailed events on Zoom. We can have every couple of weeks or every month. It doesn't matter. Because this entire year, this is all I will do. So I want to invite people to join us by registering themselves. And there's a lot more to discuss. And thank you all of you panelists and our wonderful moderator.
I would like to thank Rajiv for writing an excellent, thought-provoking book, which is kind of stirring everybody into action. And I think good action will result out of this. I would also like to thank all the panel members for being very, very supportive and very insightful in terms of their comments and their expertise in terms of getting the whole, developing the whole subject across. Thank you very much for this. I would like to thank Gautam Senji, Lieutenant General Anjan Mukherjee, Dr. Prithvis Mukherjee, Pratosh AP, and I would also like to thank the production crew, which has developed the entire behind the scenes production process to bring this show up. Thank you very much. And in conclusion, I would like to say that the Center for Innovation in Governance at the Rashtram School of Public Leadership is committed to looking at blending the advances in technology, in techniques, in management processes, and melding them across with the endowments that we have within the Dharma knowledge systems, so that we can actually empower our governance structure going forward, and we can help our future leaders have the necessary drishti to be able to solve some of these complex problems as we engage with the future, because it's going to be a brave new world in many ways, and the world is there for the thing. The other thing that is there is that the whole AI challenge is to give the story of Ram when he went for the Swayamvar with Sita. It was a test of capacity and capability of lifting the Shiv Dhanush. So AI is in a way a Shiv Dhanush, which only the capable will be able to manage and ride sustainably in the future. And the crash of a civilization means that only the most stress-tested civilizations will actually survive. And I think we have the necessary endowments, and we must invest in these going forward. So thank you very much.